Hi, I'm Tristan, and this is Thinking About Politics. So today, we're thinking about the F word. No, not that one. Freedom! It's a word that crops up a lot in American politics, and it's one that really doesn't seem to be very well understood by the contemporary generation of Americans. There's this sad and unfortunate tendency to believe that freedom means the ability to do whatever you want, or the ability to just be left alone. But those two things aren't freedom. Doing whatever you want is called anarchy when everybody can do it, and it's called tyranny when only you can do whatever you want. Being left alone isn't freedom either. That's just solitude. None of those are the freedom we think about when we wax poetic about what freedom means. Freedom, as we've come to know it, is a form of engagement. It's a mode of living together, not just how you conduct yourself apart, or the ability to have autonomy. At the end of the day, every single one of us is an individual. We have an individual existence. But governments have come about not from some magic, but because people like to interact together. Ultimately, I think we want to keep those interactions peaceful to the extent that we can. So there's at least one way to think about government as the consent of the governed. Societies function when individuals just kind of decide to come together, to self-moderate their more extreme positions, and to prioritize fulfilling the obligations we owe to one another over fulfilling our own wants and desires, or at least making room for them. This ability to put a bracket around somebody's selfish self-interest and think about the broader public good. In the parlance of a bygone era, that sort of thing was called Republican virtue, small r. What I want to stress here is freedom is not the wholesale abdication of self-interest, nor is it the wholesale satisfaction of your every whim and desire, but rather it's a point of view, a way of looking at the world that allows for that public interest to seep its way into your mind. We understand that every individual has a set of narrow self-interests, and we also understand that there are times where that self-interest needs to yield to public considerations and the public interest. This will happen from time to time, and it's going to take sober reflection upon the real facts to determine when the public interest has to trump a private interest. There's no quick and easy rules. When we learn to operate together, when we learn how to engage with one another in a way to be free, freedom appears. And I'm talking about the real freedoms. Freedoms that our ancestors probably couldn't imagine depending on where they were. Freedoms like the freedom to speak your mind, the freedom to pray to the God you want, the freedom to organize with your neighbors and make a petition of your grievances against the government. This freedom of thought, this freedom of mind, this freedom of expression is only possible when you have a society that understands how to engage one another and protect those freedoms. It depends on a fluidity of the mind, an ability to abandon one's preconceived notions and to adopt new points of view. However, it's also this fluidity of mind that could allow for the wholesale abandonment of Republican virtue, of Republican ideals. And once we abandon that outlook, that perspective, that way of interacting with one another that is true freedom, once we lose that, we will plunge directly back into the historical norm of oppression and fear and superstition. What we have today is not automatic. It can get worse. So it's yet to be seen if humanity can really, for a long time, hold on to this Republican virtue, these ideals, this freedom. Can human beings use their reason and their empathy to manage their affairs? Or are they always going to be held hostage to the self-interest of the most powerful person in the room? Is the freedom we're experiencing today just like a historical fluke? Or is this something akin to a step of evolution? Once upon a time I read a book about Greek history. I can only half remember right now. And in it, I remember the idea that the ancient Athenians had, the creators of what would become democracy. And it was this idea that no one is free except for Zeus. None are free but God. And what they mean by that is, if you get hungry, you have the freedom to choose what to eat. You have the freedom to choose not to eat. But what you don't have the freedom to choose is you don't have the freedom to choose not to be hungry. If you don't eat, the consequence will be hunger. If you don't drink, the consequence will be thirst. If you don't sleep, the consequence will be tiredness. You're not free of those consequences. And it's interesting to me that these folks were the folks who would begin experimenting with democracy. I'm not going to go into it now, but the founder of Athenian democracy, at least, the thumbnails version here is this guy Solon. And he had 2 rules for a democracy. Know thyself and nothing too much. If those are the rules for a free and democratic society, we Americans have some work to do. That's it from me. You've been great. Hope to see you again next time, but until then,
I ain't got
keep
time to
thinking.
kiss you now. I'm busy with this mule.